Commission to order. Welcome everyone. The agenda before you, the first item on the agenda is to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Our next item, you should have received on board docs or seen on board docs a set of minutes from our last regular meeting. I did note the revisions.
We can't hear.
The first item is to review the minutes from our last regular meeting, and I noted a few corrections myself. In the middle of page 5, Chairman Light stated that the apartment had to be lived in by a family member for 2 years, should be years plural. 2 lines down, Chairman Light moved to hold a public hearing. Ms. Smith seconded. The motion carried 5-0. Mr. Kohler not at the table to vote, recused. Further down that page, Mr. Kohler stated they were using existing structures and they had DDOH approved. It should probably be approval. Top of page 6, Chairman Light questioned if all the 14 rooms would be within the same area. Not sure my exact words, but the question was were they within the same, with the existing structures. The question was whether there would be any new construction. So I think you should say that they would be within the existing structures.
Excuse me, repeat that.
Sure.
Was that, when you said, I just had a question about that. It said they would all be within the same structure. Or were you saying they would all be within existing structures? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, my question was whether they would be within existing structures. In other words, we're not approving any new construction for these additional rooms. That was the nature of my question. I don't recall if the answer was a slight variation or not, but I do know what I was asking. We could seek clarification on that tonight if you're inclined. Anybody have any additional changes? Those are the ones I have.
I've got mostly just minor stuff. On the public comments, first line, there will be no public, there were no public hearings, hearings, it would be plural. On the Margaret Bond paragraph, on behalf of, second line, on behalf of the Broadband Committee, on the 4th paragraph is Bob Hurley, I can't say Bunley, but it's Hurley. And next page 3, Mr. Capielli, 2nd paragraph, for the use of 2 acres, it's just a misspelling basis. And on the 4th paragraph at the bottom, Mr. Henry, I believe, stated that next to the last line, he questions there would be issues with gas leaks. I think he said gas or fluids, leaking, gas or fluid leaks from various vehicles, because there could be oil or whatever it could be. And on the 3rd paragraph from the bottom, Ms. Smith stated she wasn't clear what activity to expect on site, and whether she confirmed it's about the details not being specific instead of been specific. I think that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Kohler. Any other recommended revisions?
Also, under public comment, it's Sheila Gressinger with 1 S instead of Getzinger. That's all I have.
Thank you. Anything else? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as amended. Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I will sustain since I was not here at the last meeting.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the next item on the agenda is a general public comment period. This is the first of 4 opportunities you will have to speak this evening. The other 3 being the public hearings associated with the individual special use or special exception application. So at this time, I'll open the public comment period. I'll ask that you, I believe we have a microphone, I'll ask that you come forward, identify yourself and your address or your district, and please do keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. If you have information, particularly with respect to your feedback on the draft comprehensive plan that really can't be covered in 3 minutes, you're more than welcome to submit written comments to Ms. Summers. We have been receiving comments, and we're particularly interested in comments that are referred to specific passages of the current draft. So with that, is there anyone who cares to speak? Yes.
Comprehensive planning began in Rappahannock County back in 1973. When the Rappahannock League for Environmental Protection invited me, Palmer, who was the chairman of the Landscape Architecture Department of the University of Virginia, to address a new concept, and that was comprehensive planning. And work began in 1974 here in Rappahannock County. There was a committee that was appointed by the Board of Supervisors, and they came up with a comprehensive plan that has evolved quite well. It has served us very well over the years. It has been reviewed, it has been modified several times over the period, and has evolved into what we are pretty much using today as modified. And to change the subject very briefly, Scenic Virginia has commissioned the Virginia Tech to come up with a concept known as a viewshed register, which will be implemented perhaps in the next 3 months or so. And it will be a statewide project that will identify those particular areas that are of particular scenic beauty. And that is, of course, very much of interest to ourselves here in Rappahannock County, because our most important ingredient is the scenery. It's what we see out of our windows, out of our houses, out of our cars as we drive down the highways. It's our incomparable scenery. And speaking of incomparable, that is a word that I think probably applies to Rappahannock County. We are incomparably different than other places, and I hope that we can do everything that we can to make sure that we stay in that situation, incomparably different. This place matters, and I hope that whatever planning that we do in our comprehensive plan is done with that in mind, and not by professionals who might be paid high money and would plan to make Rappahannock County like all of our neighbors. I don't want to be like our neighbors. I want to be incomparably different. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lynn. Anyone else who would care to speak? Yes, ma'am, please.
I'm Jennifer Alexander. I live in the Wakefield district. And I had a couple questions and then something I'd like to put forward for consideration for the comprehensive plan. I keep seeing the phrase affordable housing. Could somebody enlighten me as to what kind of group of people are we talking here? How affordable? Minimum wage? Seniors on rent? I mean, it's a rather nebulous phrase, so I wondered if somebody might be able to enlighten me on that. The second that was my question. The things I'd like to have you consider adding in would be, I think it's page 82, there's a comment about protecting the access to the Shenandoah National Park for the hiking trails. Well, that's nice. I'd rather never have to hike myself. I have several nice horses and we ride the trails, so I do think that specifically needs to be added in. There's 2 or 3 places throughout the plan that I wrote down, I'll go over later, but just whenever you use the word hiking, add horseback riding because the park permits it. So we shouldn't block it, and we have very few legal access points into the park at this time. And so, 3 that they acknowledge. I also got a little confused on whether subdivision land development ordinances seem to be wrapped up in the comprehensive plan. Is that correct? I would like to see them separated because it would make your job easier. It would make it easier for us to understand in the future. And then if they need tweaking in 20 years, it's certainly easier to do that. And along that line, I dealt with some planning up in Pennsylvania, and there's something called the Brandywine Conservancy, which is part of the, well, it's the Environmental Management Center, part of the Brandywine Conservancy, and they have a handbook of model ordinances. And you can buy it for $400, which I didn't, but the only sentence that I thought we used all the time up there, added into every single township, is what they call them, was locations of walkways and paths, pedestrian, equestrian, bicycle, etc., that have been in public use, with proposals for their continued protection through easement or otherwise. That's a lot in one little sentence, because then you start talking about private property. That is in the comprehensive plan, is something that we might want to go ahead and look at including into the future. Then they have some separate things that come under that, but they break them out into subdivision, land development, and zoning, so I won't go into that today. But I think that in view, am I over 3 minutes? Because I'm.
You are, man.
Keep going? No, I'm over.
I think you're about finished.
Okay.
But we appreciate your comments, and again, it looks like you had them written down. Please feel free to submit those or send them along. If you have a specific reference to that organization, we're glad to look at those. And just to be clear, that the ordinance is generally the legally binding rules and laws by which we carry out in detail the broader goals and mission and objectives and policies that are outlined in the more visionary and general comprehensive plan. So that's the relationship between the two. I think we'll be talking some more about affordable housing. There is no, that I can see, legal definition in the state code. Department of Housing and Human Development defines it as housing that costs less than 30% of one's income. Even that is ambiguous. I think around here it's used a lot of different ways, both for the elderly as well as the desire to have our valued EMS school teachers and other folks able to live here in the county. But again, there is no explicit definition. The reason it's a subject, though, is it is required to be treated in the comprehensive plan. It's one of the few statutory requirements to be addressed, but it's with a very vague reference. So, sorry for that interlude, but is there anyone else who would like to speak? Yes, sir.
Gary, on the subject of affordable housing, I'm sorry, Alan Suschlag, Jackson District. I think it's a very valid concern and obviously needs to be addressed in the comprehensive plan. But I see this in local media all the time, and I get chagrined as a local real estate agent because there's plenty of affordable housing to be had in this area and plenty of rental properties that go asking for tenants. because people maybe don't want to share a house or so forth like that, as they do in other jurisdictions. I think we have plenty of affordable housing, but I think, and I don't know if the comprehensive plan is the place to address this, I think we have to address what we define as affordable housing for our residents. Everybody trots out the EMS and the firefighters and the school teachers, whatever like that. We have plenty of housing for those people that sit on the market waiting for buyers or renters to rent them. So I don't think that's an issue here. I think more importantly, what I'm concerned about is what we do with our aging population and their ability to either age in place or to downsize to a location within the county where their friends and family and people that they know that they can afford to live in maybe a smaller, more comfortable unit. And that I don't think the county has adequately addressed in the past or currently, as if we can maybe alter our zoning to allow increased density for an elderly population that wants to stay in the county and doesn't want to maintain a larger residence. So I'd just like to mention that.
Thank you. Anyone else care to speak?
Deke Deacons, Hampton District, Rock Mills. I've brought this point up several times at the Board of Supervisors hearing meetings and haven't had an awful lot of response in terms of, I was held to a pretty high standard 35 years ago in terms of slope of our property, which is pretty minor compared to what I see. I was held to the standard of majority of the property has to be less than 14% grade in order to build on it. And all you have to do is look at the last issue of the paper highlighted the monstrosities that are up there. Little Jenkins Mountain, looks like a bunch of Mississippi River boats docked there. If you're going to have a conservation district, which I'm completely opposed to, but if you're going to have a conservation district, conserve these mountaintops. If you allow these people, if you don't hold everybody to the same standard, and you allow these people to build on something that's obviously more than 14% grade, then restrict their lighting, restrict their colors, make it disappear, make it blend in. We're approaching a vertical Fairfax County is where we're going to be. Just remember this conversation 10 years from now, and if you continue to develop the ridge tops. The other point I want to bring up is about this affordable housing. I'm a builder, have been a builder for 46 years, and I'm keen on the idea of affordable housing. I'm negative in terms of definition. I'm negative on Section 8. I'm negative on subsidized housing. In my experience as a builder, I don't see very many positive things that come out of that. And it's just a domicile to receive your welfare check-in, and I'm opposed to that. So just keep in thought in mind about this. I think there's a conflict back to the building on the ridge tops. We have a dark sky initiative, and then we turn around and ruin that. And with these lighted monstrosities that are up there.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would care to speak?
I would. David Connick, Stonewall District. Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission, I would like to call your attention to Principle 9 of the Comprehensive Plan, which says, encourage citizen involvement in the planning process, especially policies number 2 and 4, which is provide an opportunity for citizens to participate in all phases of the planning process. And Principle 4, or Policy 4 says, encourage all interested parties to review and comment on the comprehensive plan and implementing ordinances. Last week you had a work session in which you barred any public participation or comment other than sitting here and watching. And I think that violates Principle 9. And to me, it's a reflection of one of the problems that you as a commission have. You know, you talked a lot at the work session about the lack of staff and the high cost of getting outside consultants. to help with the comprehensive plan. Well, as Phil pointed out, the comprehensive plan was developed almost entirely with less staff than we have now, and with a lot of citizen participation. Dick McNear, for example, helped a lot, and various other people. And what the commission's doing now, by basically excluding members of the public, is making that problem that you perceive even worse. There are a lot of people in the community, Phil's one of them, I'm one of them, former members of the commission, which there are many, many. Lots of them don't even come to your meetings anymore because of, for example, this ridiculous limitation of 3 minutes. Where that came from, I don't know. It's not in the rules, it's not anywhere. It used to be 5 minutes, and I don't know where that came from. And I was talking to one of your members, and we discussed all of that, and whether it's appropriate and so forth. And at the end of the discussion, I said, you know, one of the things that you didn't mention was the fact that some of us here in the public who aren't on the commission may actually have some good ideas of planning tactics and things to preserve the county based on our own experience, based on experiences of other places, and we're just pretty much shut out of the process. You can submit a letter, great, and you don't get any feedback. You sometimes get a thank you for your letter, and that's it. Nobody, I've written numerous letters, not just recently, but over the years, and I never got a substantive response and from the commission, from anybody on the commission, and I never saw any actual discussion at the meetings. So I want to address a couple of those things right now. First of all,
Your 3 minutes are up, sir, but I'll give you 2 more.
Thanks. The first thing is, if you would utilize the experience of other counties, and I have suggested, and I was very flattered to see that you, Mr. Chairman, and you with me did take a look at other, obviously Hollymead knows what they're doing in Fauquier. I agree with Phil that just because, I don't think we should get outsiders, but it provides a lot of ideas that would be useful in how to structure the comprehensive plan. Second, there's a lot of stuff in there that you can pretty much copy, and most of what we've got in our zoning and subdivision ordinance and in the comprehensive plan was not generated here in Rappahannock County. Most of it was cribbed from some other locality, and they cribbed it from some other locality like Fairfax. And so that's why it's helpful to look at those. One of the subjects that the commission just brushed over is the last 2 chapters of the comprehensive plan. After you lay out all these lovely policies, which as at least 2 people, maybe 3, have said tonight, there's no definition of what is affordable housing. There's no definition of ridgetop development. There's no definition of a whole lot of things in there. And so what happens? It's in the comp plan, and when somebody feels like it's worth citing, they get up and cite it. Most of your hearings, people don't bring up the comprehensive plan. There's nothing in there that's specific enough to be relevant to one decision or another. When you talk about ridgetop development, for example, you've got a big legal question of how you can restrict what people do on their own property. If somebody buys a place that has a ridgetop, whatever a ridgetop is, I don't know, some of them we know, but some of them I don't know. What constitutes a ridgetop? How high does it have to be? There's no definition of any of that anywhere in our ordinances or state law. What is it? And what right do you have, or does the commission have, or does the Rappahannock County have, if somebody buys something that includes a ridgetop, to say, you've got to build somewhere on your property where I can't see it, or you can't see it, or the neighbors can't see it. There's case law that suggests that's not the law. And so before you go there, and before you put all that flowery stuff in there, you need to have some legal clarification, either from the county attorney or the attorney general, somebody, and find out what some of these things mean before you go putting it in here. Because otherwise, it's just a recipe for disaster. Maybe not disaster, but it's a recipe for whatever you adopt pursuant to it to be thrown out. And I want to suggest to you, because when this thing of affordable housing came up, I looked at some other counties and see what they did. I looked at Fauquier, I looked at Culpeper. And I suggest to all of you to look at the Culpeper comprehensive, town of Culpeper comprehensive plan, because they've got a land use plan. In what we have is chapter 7, it doesn't have any maps, doesn't have anything specific about what is the future land use. And until you formulate that, and until you do a thing like that, going around to the communities is not going to help. You need to have a plan that people can comment intelligently on, so that when you go to Woodville, you get some Woodville residents and say, what do they envision as the future of Woodville? And that's what they've got in front of them. All right, wait a minute, I got chapter 8 to cover. Culpeper also has a specific work plan where they have laid out things that have to be done, like specific sections of the zoning ordinance and subdivision ordinance that need to be worked on. And they've got kind of a rough timetable. Some of the things are immediate, within the next year, some of them within the next 2 or 3 years, and some of them by the next time we adopt a comprehensive plan. And those are the kind of things that don't take a consultant and don't take a lot of money. You need to work on it. The commission needs to work on it. That's why you're on there. And there's many people, me included, who will volunteer to help with that process if you want our help. But the message that I get, not just me personally, but from seeing how you deal with other people, is you sit down and listen to the comments, and then that's the end of it. Not one offer of help from, I've got 15 or 20 different people over the last 4 or 5 years.
Please,
It's
sir,
never been taken
wrap it
up.
up. Thank you.
Right, see what I mean?
We have a meeting to get on to, sir. Your comments are all welcome, and as are your written, so we appreciate that. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Yes, sir.
Ron Ackle from Jackson District. At your work session last week, your chairman basically put out 3 options as to how you were going to approach basically reworking the draft that you have before you right now. My concern is, and I'm a supporter of the number 3 option, I think we need to take a serious look at all of this and basically rework it. But I also think that as members of the commission or whatever, you need to take the time to speak to the people that you represent and find out what they are looking for. In that it's not, I don't feel it's a decision that you all can make just sitting there at the table. You need to talk to the people you represent, see why they want to go with it, come back, and then let's start working on it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Yes, sure, Mr. Perry.
Chris Parrish, I'm in Hawthorne District. So I just came to listen, but can't help myself, sorry. As Mr. Armin mentioned, we've had this comprehensive plan for a long time. It's worked really well, and it's just a plan. A lot of people don't know this, but there is not a single law in the state of Virginia that requires us to follow the comprehensive plan. We're required to have one. We're required to have one. We're required to review it every 5 years. We're not required to change it. And so, let's just say we went ahead and passed this existing plan pretty much as it is now, with a few tweaks to make it comprehensive. And there's nothing stopping us from working on the next one. We don't have to wait 5 years to review it. It can be an ongoing thing. The plan is used to kind of create our zoning, which is law, which is statute. And so it just seems to me like this existing plan has worked pretty well for all these years. I mean, I think that most people in the county have what they want today. And so I'm really concerned that, I mean, as everybody knows, when this started out, we went around to every district and got feedback. Everybody had their chance then, and things got delayed, and so there's no real reason to start the process all over again. It's going to be counterproductive. So it'd be a good idea, in my opinion, my humble opinion, to wrap this up as soon as possible and work on the zoning tweaks, which are statutes, which are enforceable by law, and then go ahead and before the 5 years is up, we can start reviewing the comprehensive plan. We don't have to wait 5 years or 10 years or whatever. That's my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak?
Yeah, I would like to answer what Mr. Parrish said.
I believe we've heard enough from you tonight, sir. Thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak?
You are so insulting.
Anyone else who's going to speak? If not, I hereby close the public comment period. Next item on the agenda is special use number 19-02-01, the Annie Cato family apartment.
Mr. Chairman, respectfully, I will recuse myself, as I did last time on this. Rick Fuller, Jackson District. My company is Real Estate 3, and we have had a business relationship in the past.
Thank you. Ms. Summers, would you like to see this up?
Thank you. Mrs. Cato has applied for a family apartment for her property located at 40 Angel Kiss Lane in Castleton. The proposed family apartment is the smaller, within the packet there's pictures, the smaller finished structure on the property, which is a manufactured home that has been there since the 90s. She will only use the structure as a one-bedroom home. The larger unfinished structure, which was started as a farm building in 1998, will be finished in the near future in accordance with the standards of today's building code and be used as a principal dwelling. Mrs. Cato has indicated within her application that her stepdaughter will occupy the family apartment to help her care for the property. The health department indicated that the owner is in the process of applying for a minor modification permit, which she needs to install a new sewer connection from the larger house to the existing septic system. And a condition can be recommended and or placed upon the permit that she complies with all building and health department standards. And the applicant is present.
Thank you. The applicant care to add anything to the discussion thus far with the application?
Well, I've submitted letters. I hope everybody's had an opportunity to read what I submitted. Letters from my neighbors who are in agreement with changing that to a family apartment. I've been in the county for 23 years, paying taxes, living there, and my goal is to get that unit redesignated so that I can finish the unfinished house.
Thank you. This time I would open the public hearing on this particular application. Is there anybody here tonight who would like to speak on this application? If not, I will close the public hearing on this application. This is in my district, but if you all don't mind, I think I'd like to hear from each of you before opining. Mr. Bird, would you mind responding to the questions or concerns you have?
I have a couple of questions. This could be my failing, but are the two buildings within 200 feet of each other?
Yes.
And the proposed family apartment is how many square feet?
It's right at 1,200 square feet.
1,200. Is that within
The requirement in the ordinance is 1,200.
1,200.
At the last meeting, it was estimated at 1,150, or whatever that's worth, but it sounds like we're close.
In that situation, it would seem we have had 2 previous applications like this, where the cart was put in front of the horse, so to speak. The family apartment was permitted before the principal dwelling was finished. And that doesn't seem to have caused any particular problems. And so that it seems to me that this is a reasonable and valid use of the land, and it would also be thought of as helping the owner age in place, which seems another desirable aspect of life here in the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berg. Ms. Smith?
I have a similar question about the history of, kind of the square peg and the round hole process like we have for this, where we're permitting a structure that's already existing, and then there will, I guess, be a new building permit for the larger structure. In the past, when this happened, was the larger structure permitted before or after construction began?
We have had examples of both. The system, if you're looking for an answer from me, I give you my understanding. Others have more history and legal understanding, but there clearly have been examples of both. Clearly, this is not the favored approach. We tend to prefer to have the zoning and use approved before building permits and therefore before construction, but this is not the first case. In some cases, the situation is slightly different in that there's pre-approval for a smaller dwelling because people aren't quite ready to build a larger one, and then they come in and sort of transfer their primary domicile from the smaller one to the larger one. So that's a much more common path. I don't know, I've asked others, but I don't know of another situation precisely like this where a building was built under some other use. In this case, it seems agricultural use, and then was retroactively approved in this manner. So I'm not aware of an exact precedent for this, but I certainly ask my colleagues to opine. Mr. Henry, do you have?
I think we did something like this over on Grimsley Road back about 8 or 10 years ago. Maybe the last one, the applicant was Handback. We did something like this.
Can't hear.
I think we did a similar situation over on Grimsley Road back about 10 years ago where an applicant had a small existing building, was going to build a house, and wanted to have a family apartment area in a building and then build his house. So I think the important thing here is what is going to be the picture of the property after the work is done in 6 months. So I don't see whether there's an issue either way or detriment.
Thank you. Ms. Smith?
Do you remember offhand if there were any special restrictions or conditions put on that?
Not that word.
I would just say, since, part of the condition of the family apartment, it's sort of an increase in density based on certain conditions, and one of the conditions is that the family inhabits the family apartment for 2 years. So I would say in this circumstance, if we're going to consider making the smaller structure the family apartment and the larger new building the primary residence, that the smaller structure, the 2 years for a family to inhabit the smaller structure start when the permission to move into the larger building is granted, the occupancy permit.
Okay, well, we can certainly come back to that. Anything else for now?
No, thank you.
Ms. Sill?
Upon reviewing the request, I don't have any questions per se. I believe that having a resident where you can age into it is a huge benefit in the county. Because I agree with the comments earlier that the elderly population sort of doesn't have a place to go. So I'm in favor of the request.
Mr. Henry, do you have more to say on this application?
No questions.
I think the question here of trying to reconcile something that was done on the edge of the requirements does cause some particular concerns, at least with respect to precedent and the need to, the need to make our ordinances meaningful. So I don't think there's much question that if this application came in ahead of time, it would have been fairly easy for us to approve. But the fact that it came in late gives us some circumstances that make it a little different, one of which has been addressed or discussed, that this was started as an agricultural building and then changed. The other is that this property has been listed fairly recently, and it's not really up to us to confirm someone's plans or whether they're going to stay. But I do think there are different circumstances here, and getting to the point I believe Ms. Smith was getting at with respect to the requirement for family use, I would be comfortable with a restriction. I'm not sure we've done this, that this exception is only for this current owner set. That if it's sold, that the secondary property would revert to not a separate dwelling, but a guest house or some not a separate dwelling unit for that property. That would seem to allow for the need for the support as the current owner chooses to age in place, but it would also address the concern that if 6 months from now a plan changes and this is sold, that there wouldn't be kind of cashing in on having two residences on property that was approved for one in this manner. So I don't know if there's much of a precedent for that. I'd be interested in my colleagues' reaction to that. So I don't think that's quite what you were describing, Ms. Smith, but I think we're both trying to address the same concern. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I don't think we've ever done that, and I think we should talk about that. In years past, it was an issue of enforcement and legality of it, and also the issue that going down the road that Ms. Cato has a plan to use it this way. She may use it for 5 years, 10 years, and then maybe sell it or whatever. The next owner may not have the same plan, but these units that are done this way are controlled, they have a size to them, and they play a role in providing housing in the county, whether it's for, I know these things have ended up housing deputies, they've housed single teachers, they've housed landscape workers, and there's been different uses of these houses on people's property at this time and on. So I think it serves after the current user, I don't want to use the word passes on, but passes from the scene, that they fill a need in the county for, modest, affordable housing for various segments in the county.
So the period would be after, the period you're describing would be the 2-year period that's called for in the statute, regardless of ownership transfers during that period.
I think that's easy to do, given the definition, 170-62, it says the apartment may not be rented to anyone other than a family member for a period of 2 years following completion thereof. It doesn't specify that it has to be that family's family member,
Right.
but it could be the next family's family member.
If it were
and
transferred,
convey,
that restriction,
should there be a sale.
that restriction would convey. Okay. Well, again, I feel like this is one that, there's nothing the only thing particularly unusual about this is the order in which we're addressing these matters. So I will move that we recommend approval of the application subject to the ordinance and as proposed.
Did you want a second?
Please,
A second?
any further discussion?
Do you want to add the standard verbiage that you should put in about health department, building department?
That would be helpful. I don't know that it's necessary, their jurisdiction doesn't come from ours, but I think it's helpful if we do remind the applicant, so subject to the, in this case, it will only be the health department, I believe. Are you still contemplating a comment, Mr. Henry?
Well, I guess, Ms. Smith, the point is, I guess, the 2 years begins at the point of OP. Because that's when all this goes into place in terms of the door use and the mother being in some cases.
Yeah, I'm not,
I mean, if you cut it in today or whenever, soon, I don't know what the period of construction is going to be, whether it's 6 months or a year or whatever.
sure, it's not clear to me that the zoning ordinance as it exists now is clear on what the starting period is, but I think it would make sense.
You can't use them until it's finished.
Right, so that would be a natural, that would be presumed anyway, I mean, but I suppose one could argue that when it's approved is the start of the 2-year period, but I don't have any problem specifying that the 2-year period to begin upon occupancy of the primary dwelling,
Occupancy permit.
the occupancy permit.
That makes sense.
Makes very good sense.
Is that sufficiently clear to you? I'll amend my motion in that regard. I assume you'll still second,
Second.
given that you said. Any further discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. Your next stop will be to the,
I want to ask if she has any questions.
do you have any questions about what we just did, or? No. Okay, say it.
I'll get in touch with Michelle.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is special exception number 19-02-01, the Glenford Manor expansion of the Country Inn. Ms. Summers, if you would read this up, please.
Thank you. Glenford Manor obtained a special exception permit in 2010 for a country inn. They are now requesting additional rooms and events. The property is located at 1482 Zachary Taylor Highway in Huntley. In 2002, the original special exception permit was for up to 9 rooms and 6 events. They now wish to expand up to 14 rooms. No new construction will take place. They plan to utilize the existing Gordon Hughes structure. The 6 events will be up to 100. Their current permit is for 6 events up to 100 people annually. They wish to increase that to 12 events. For these events, they will require portable facilities to be used and any outdoor events be concluded by 11 p.m. Upgrades to the septic system will need to be completed to accommodate the proposed expansion of the system. A condition can be recommended or placed upon the permit to comply with all the health department regulations regarding the water and sewer. VDOT did comment and they had no issues with the application as presented, and applicants are present.
Thank you. Would the applicant care to add anything before we open the public comment, or public hearing, sorry?
No, that's it.
Thank you. And I will hereby open the public hearing on this special exception permit. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Yes?
John McPherson, resident of Washington, business owner of Sperryville. There aren't many places in the county that can accommodate events in a beautiful location that's off a main road, that's not visible to the majority of the residents of the county. Glen Gordon Manor is probably one of the only ones that can do that. These folks have been in the county for a number of years running a business, and to my knowledge, have done it to the absolute peak of hospitality. So if a permit was going to be granted for additional rooms and for additional events, I couldn't see a better fit than Glen Gordon Manor and the Smith family. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'd like to echo Chef McPherson's comments. I think we are blessed in this county with a lot of talent, and an editorial side, a lot of ambitions, and sometimes they don't match up well, but this is a case where they do. And if ever there was a property that should be granted an expansion of their current use, this is it. Too often we have people wanting to monetize their properties and coming before you seeking for an event space or whatever like that. They have zero business experience and zero preparation for that. This is the exact opposite. This is a world-class facility. We have 3 of my favorite chefs in the audience right now that are bringing in revenues from outsiders to pay our taxes, which I love as a taxpayer. And I would encourage you to accept this wholeheartedly, because Glen Gordon is going to tax outsiders, not us, in the process, and I think that's a benefit. I have had some of the most memorable experiences of my life with Chef Dane and Nancy at their facility, and they are flawless and world-class, so I think we couldn't ask for a better fit for this kind of thing.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would care to speak on this application? Not, I will close the public hearing on special exception 190201 and turn to my commissioners. I believe this is in Ms. Mead's district, who is unable to be here tonight because of her husband's health matters. So, Mr. Byrd, may I begin with you?
I tend to agree with all of the comments spoken by the public, that this seems to be a very positive and proper addition to our county, and it seems to have very little, if any, downside to it, and so it would seem a good development, and I would support it.
Thank you. Ms. Smith?
I thought at last month's meeting when Ms. Mead was here, she vetted this topic very well, and I don't have any further questions.
Thank you. Ms. Silla?
I don't have any questions at this point either.
Thank you. Mr. Cole?
Just housekeeping on the application for the special exception that I have. It doesn't have whether you've notified your neighbors. It's not checked anyway.
That has been done
Okay.
by our office.
Okay, thank you. And drawing, and you have, presumably you have VDOT approval.
Yes, they had no objections as it was presented.
That's all I have at the moment.
Mr. Henry?
So on the red site plan that's in the package, proposed tent locations for events only, that's going to be the only location where you can put up a tent?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that will become kind of imprinted there, so just for your future reference.
I'm sorry.
That will kind of be imprinted there for your future reference. So.
You're saying that's binding in the
Well,
permit?
it's in the site plan,
Yeah.
so that's just.
Yeah, that's fine. That's really the only place to put it.
there was some correspondence, I guess, that been going around about the Medj card on the health department, that maybe you're falling into a different water category now, maybe?
Perhaps. She asked me to fill out a new water, not application, but a new questionnaire that I submitted. So it's not.
So tell the commission what that means, going from one category to the other.
I really don't know. That's entirely up to Medj, you know.
And she has not determined that at this point, so whatever that would fall under, she would provide him with what they would need to do.
And I think it's just who has oversight, whether it's county or somebody else.
For the Department of Drinking Water.
Right now, the county has oversight, so we submit our water samples to the county.
I think it's probably a pretty big deal if you switch into this next category. You're going to become more like a public entity, more so than just proprietary owner of these properties. So you're going to be held to I think a higher standard, more testing and everything like that. That would be typical of a community, in a public community, a subdivision, or a larger, somebody that comes into contact with so many more people in these various uses. And I guess we would definitely want to see that situation completely addressed, you know, exactly where it's falling into, because I don't know whether there will be any upgrades required to push you into this other category or not that you may want to consider. But since we're vague here on what this means, other than more regulations and whether it's going to be a monetary investment that you're going to have, I guess we want to make sure that that's absolutely addressed before this increased use starts. We might approve it, but it's subject to that. But I wouldn't want to see that use start until that health department was addressed, because I think kind of in this email, it was kind of inferred that you had some distance to go yet. You wasn't quite where maybe the comment of last month indicated you were.
I'm not following you at all.
So it's not my application. I'm just, it's not my application.
I got a request from Medj saying fill out this questionnaire and send it in, which I did.
Well, the email we got said it wasn't quite as rosy. I don't know, not the term rosy, but he was not quite as far along as may have been indicated in your comments last month. And so I think you got a little bit of distance to go yet, whatever it is. And I just...
Theoretical distance? Because what distance do you cover before you have an okay?
That you're going from one category to another.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps.
Perhaps.
What is the line on that?
That's for the health department. State regulations on drinking water.
I believe the point is we would want to be assured that you satisfy those requirements, whatever they turn out to be from those authorities.
Well, I don't think we have any choice, right, to operate, so we either have to...
Sometimes things get lost, sometimes they get, forgotten and lost in Rappahannock County, in the building department, in different places. And I don't want to see this get lost.
Has that lovely attitude.
I mean, it's health, you have to.
Well, some things get lost out here, and I want to make a point of this, and I want to get lost.
It's the same issue addressed in the last permit. It may be belts and suspenders, but...
Well, this is a higher threshold.
Right, there is
Usually the health issues we address, they're mundane, but this is a higher health issue.
Thank you.
And you got drain fields, a lot of drain fields here along on the side.
Mr. Chairman, may I just ask for clarification?
Please.
On the site plan, I only see 11 bedrooms. I'm not quite sure where the 4 are.
We're really not going up. So when we first opened, we opened with 4 rooms. even though we got a permit for 9. And we grew into 9. And now, we are actually gonna have 11, with potential to go to 14.
I see, okay. So,
The 14 is the maximum we could possibly go to with the structures as they are.
are you applying for 14 or 11?
For 14.
14, okay. But those other 3 rooms, what building are they in, the main building?
Yeah, there's the main building, and the Muse.
Okay, because you have 4 over in the, you have 5 over in the main building.
5 in the main.
And 2 in the cottage up front, and the, or behind them, wherever it is.
Yeah.
Left of the building, and north, and then you have 4 in the little building behind.
Correct.
So the others would be in the main building?
Yes. Well, the one cottage that says 2 bedrooms, there's a 2-bedroom unit in there. So that could be considered 3. Okay, even though it's 2 keys.
Okay.
So it's sold as 1 unit, but there are 2 bedrooms in it.
This is sort of where we were when we reached this point in the conversation last time, and that's why I asked the point, we clarified in the minutes, that I think the key for us is there's no new construction. What they're talking about is 14 rooms within the footprint of the current structures, which I believe is sort of the boundary of our involvement at this stage.
And those rooms all currently exist?
Yes, they do.
Anything else? Actually, Mr. Henry, I'm not sure if you were through. Mr. Kohler, you? The only other thing I would like to address, and there's been some, as we've discussed this, there's been some, at least ambiguity. It's not clear to me, the way the events are described seems to leave out something, it seems to imply something fairly obvious that I feel like, if I'm right, it should be explicit. The events for up to 30 persons 2 times monthly, those are indoor events, and the events for up to 100 persons 6 times or however many times annually are outdoor events. That seems to me to be what's implied. I'm not sure why it wasn't stated that way, but would you have a problem if we made that clear?
No, so, you know, we don't say you can only have an event of 100 people. So if somebody comes to us and says we'd like to have a wedding for 75, then they can have a wedding for 75. If they want to have that all indoors, they can have that all indoors. We do have space for that. We don't have space for more than 75 indoors. So then they'd have to go outdoors and have a tent. So, you know, we could have 6 events a year that up to 75, and they'd be indoors. But anytime you go above 75, then you must rent a tent. So that's why, you know, it's not that clear.
That is a logic of the reason that it's the way it is, so it's just based on a certain number of a certain size.
Yeah, what we can accommodate indoors and what we cannot.
I don't know, this has been, I don't want to belabor it unnecessarily, but it does seem somewhat oddly ambiguous the way it's worded.
So how many indoor events are we approving then?
So right now we have approval for 2 events per month for up to 30 people. And those are basically like winemaker dinners and supper club events.
So now we're moving to...
We're leaving those in place as is.
As is. And then, well then what does the 75 number got to do with indoor events? Except you have it indoors.
Because
The
that's
question-
what Gary said, anything going up to 100 had to be, over the 30, had to be outside. And we don't need that delineation until after 75.
So does the 75 count as one of the outdoor events?
Yes.
It counts as one of the
One of the
events
larger.
up to 100.
So the point is, even though we've been trying to make the distinction between indoor and outdoor, the actual distinction is less up to 30 or greater than 30.
Yeah.
That is
Correct.
the actual distinction, and the over 30 could be indoor or outdoor depending on the actual number. With that clarification, if that's comfortable to them, I think that is enforceable, and it does answer my question originally, which is, why doesn't it say indoor outdoor? So
And that's
I'm satisfied.
That's the 12 number,
Yes.
the 12 events outdoors.
Yeah, perfect. It's not really outdoor.
Well, 12 events of up to
Up to
100. 31.
Right,
Yeah.
Indoor or outdoor.
indoor or outdoor.
So if we have 3 of 60, that counts for 3,
Right.
and they're of the 12.
And then any events that are outdoors, regardless of the number, are to be concluded by 11 p.m., right? Did we, that remains. You had drafted some conditions, I don't see those in. I don't know. Did you, am I recalling correctly? No, you did not. You're looking at me as though.
If you have a 75-person indoor wedding, you don't get outside clothing facilities, do you? Still?
We have, yes.
You do?
Mhm.
You still do that?
Yeah.
Mr. Henry, are you satisfied? I have no further questions. I would entertain a motion when we're inclined to make one.
Recommend we grant approval for the application per the special exception permit. Clarification that the 100 persons twice a year can also applies to 6 times per year. Well, 12 times per year applies also to the weddings that are held inside for groups larger than 30.
And I believe you also wanted to add the stipulation that we, subject to the health department requirements for the water and
Conclusion of that analysis of the health department requirements for water.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. This is a recommendation. You're off to Board of Supervisors at Harrison Street. In June.
It's like going to Cancun.
I'll be in touch.
Good to see you.
The next item on the agenda is special use number 190301, Susan Murphy Tourist Home. Ms. Summers.
I will note the applicant is not present tonight. She was unable to be here. Ms. Murphy applied for a tourist home located at 151 Blue Ridge Avenue in Chester Gap. It is a two-level home. She lives with her daughter in the upper level and wishes to rent out the lower level as a one-bedroom rental. I did send her the additional life safety conditions that we typically recommend for all tourist homes. She had no objections to any of them. The health department noted that Ms. Murphy will need to file a conditional permit, but felt she should wait until that she had approval for this use before doing so. And they had no objections to the requests contingent upon that conditional permit approval.
Thank you. So the applicant is not here, so no further clarification there. I believe this is also Ms. Mead's district, but Mr. Henry, may I start with you this time?
It seems like a pretty simple request. I don't recall too many times that we've done
Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Summers just reminded me that I did not open the public hearing, so apologies, Mr. Henry. I hereby open the public hearing on this application. Is there anyone who'd like to speak on this application? Well, maybe not. So I will hereby close the public hearing on this special use permit. Mr. Henry, back to you.
This seems pretty simple. I can't recall any time where we've done an application where the applicant wasn't here, or if they wasn't here, they had a spokesperson for them, so it's just kind of odd that we're gonna address this without her being here, and any questions we may have, anything else that come up, so. I'm kind of inclined just to table this for a month, until she is here.
Mr. Coleman?
Given the use of having people coming in and out, I would think that we probably want some kind of lighting requirements, and do we have a noise requirement on this? Noise after, or some sort of limits in some fashion if we can. We can't ask the applicant at the moment, so that's my position at the moment.
I think to your question, the only limits would be those that we require as conditions of the approval, so I don't think there are default limits of those sorts in the ordinance, at least with respect to this specific use, other than the broader nuisance sorts of limits. Ms. Stilla?
I agree with Mr. Henry, not having the applicant here to ask questions or further explain the application. If there's any clarification, makes it a little difficult to give a yes or no response.
Ms. Smith?
I'd be inclined to table as well.
Mr. Byrd?
I'm happy to accede to those ideas. What I remember, she did propose this at the last meeting, and what I recollect from that, that it was for one bedroom in her basement that was going to be occupied while she was there, and it was a kind of marginal different use for the house. I don't know what other questions one would have, but it does seem perfectly reasonable to want to ask, to have her available to ask.
Well, I would just note that since it's up to us to impose those kinds of conditions, if it's clear to us what we would impose, there's no reason we couldn't do that in her absence, but in any event, did you have a conversation? Do we know if she knew she was on the agenda? Did she know that she couldn't be here for some unexpected event?
She knew she was on the agenda and could not make it, but she
Okay.
reached out to let me know that.
Okay, so she did at least tell you she wouldn't be able to be here. We have opened and closed the public hearing, which is no problem, but we also got no public input, and presumably if there were people who were concerned it has been on the agenda. I'm fine with tabling it if that seems to be the sentiment.
Mr. Chairman, this is on the BZA's, it's already been advertised for public hearing next week, so my suggestion as secretary would be that you make whatever recommendations and conditions that you want, whether and if she doesn't like them, or BZA doesn't like them, or does like them, that's too bad, too sad. But I mean, it's already been advertised, and that means it's gonna have to be re-advertised. So I respectfully would suggest from the BZA that you just put up whatever conditions you think are appropriate and make your recommendation, because I think we're gonna have a hearing on it next week, and we're gonna act on it.
Mr. Chairman, the members of the BZA are very intelligent people. And their education and experience far exceeds whatever we possess here at this table. So I would be inclined just to pass it on with them with no recommendation whatsoever, so they can apply to it for whatever they would like to do. They'll find the results themselves, and they can make their decision accordingly.
Any other thoughts on the matter? Are you inclined to revisit? I mean, personally, I don't have any. I think
I'll make that a motion too, Mr. Chairman.
that we table without recommendation.
Yeah, they got 3 members here tonight, so they are completely informed.
I don't know that I'd use exactly that same verbiage to send it up to the BZA, but I'll still second the motion to go ahead and send it up there since it's already advertised.
You think it's strong enough?
Any further discussion? All in favor of moving the tape? So I guess essentially the motion is to forward the application without a recommendation in light of the fact that the applicant was not here. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. So that,
I was waiting for you.
did I not ask for those?
He didn't respond either.
Oh, no, you didn't. Paying attention, that's good. Appreciate it. We have no other new business. We do have the matter of the comprehensive plan updates. I believe you all received earlier today Ms. Summers' notes in that meeting. Just a point of technical clarification, I'm not sure that we would want to call them minutes because it really wasn't a business meeting. It might be more sensible to refer to them as notes, which could allow us to perhaps a little more flexibility in how we address them, but I'm open to suggestions on that.
I suggest you look at the Freedom of Information Act. You're a public body and you had a meeting and you have to have minutes.
That's what we call them on board of supervisors,
Okay,
or work sessions.
all right, well then I stand corrected, we'll keep it as as minutes. I believe we've had a couple of other bits of input. I recognize after our last conversation that some of the documents that I had referred to in our work session were somewhat buried, so I sent around earlier today a more direct link to particularly the Fauquier County rural land plan that I think has some of this language. I know Mr. Curry and Ms. Summers have pulled up some of the more updated agricultural data and shared the link to that, so we appreciate that. And I know based on our last work session that several of you have expressed a willingness to kind of coordinate the draft in those sections. So what I would like to propose is that we schedule another work session to take the deliberations from our last conversation and try to work those more directly into the framework of the plan itself, and where we hope to make changes to which sections of the actual document to make those for those areas that we agreed we would take on. And again, as we have throughout this process, I would encourage anyone who's got language both on the commission as well as members of the public to continue to do as they have done, which is to submit specific recommendations for changes to the plan, and we will take those up as we go through that work session. And having told the members, it seemed that the most convenient date, although it didn't work for everyone, was for the next work session would be May 1st at 6 p.m. So unless anyone's got something new that has come up, I'd like to go ahead and propose that be our next focal point for further work on the revising the draft comprehensive plan.
That would be here.
Yes, it would be here. There's no reason it couldn't be. So those were my thoughts on this matter. I know I would like to give each of you, if you care to, opportunity, open the floor for other comments, reflections on our last meeting. Anyone have anything they'd like to bring forward at this time? All right, then with respect to the zoning amendments, I believe we've had some drafts, some of the revised short-term rental and sign ordinance work. I don't know that we have an update on that. I think, as we had agreed in our last session, we're trying to focus our efforts on the comprehensive plan at this time. So does anybody have anything to update with respect to efforts on those two items of the zoning amendments?
Mr. Chairman, I did send to, I don't know if the whole commission has my work so far on the sign ordinance. And I'm happy for that to be shared. I haven't been able to work on it anymore since then, but I'm happy for that. It's really just my personal notes and thoughts, and taking the legally, I've got the LGA, I believe it is,
Yes.
LGA version, and I'm using that as the template, and then taking things from our sign ordinance and working them into that without, trying not to abort that one in any way. And
I
it's
thought that we had discussed putting that on board docs, but I can't say that I verified that it was there, so it's
I
not.
believe it is.
All right, well then, maybe that, if you've shared that with Ms. Summers, I would suggest we put it up there, even though it is it's clearly a working draft. I think it should be.
And I can go ahead
Clearly
and email
identified
them
as such.
again.
Yeah, I'd like the commission to be able to at least read that and see what parts they feel comfortable with, and there's still parts that need to be worked on quite a bit, so it's a much bigger task than I had thought it might be.
Well, we will be going through a process on that as well, and hopefully we'll be able to get some additional public input on that as well. Anybody have anything else on that topic for this evening?
I did want to backtrack, I'm sorry, to the last agenda item. Michelle had sent you some notes.
Yes,
Did
ma'am.
you receive them the other day?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that an okay format to send them in, where I reference my concern or correction in the page number?
Yes, ma'am.
And then, okay,
Perfect.
great. I'll try to get
They were
those to you for
wonderful.
the rest of the plan, sometime in the next week.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I would suggest that any of those kinds of materials that continue to trickle in before our work session, it would be great if you would please share them and post them to board docs. I have had some correspondence, nothing particularly substantive, but I forwarded some information on, I forget the name of the organization, Deedle Associates, I believe, with input on the public housing. I've suggested that they provide particular input. So again, at our work session, I know there's concern that we're not taking public comment at those work sessions, but I understand that we do need to have an opportunity to work. We're doing this in the eye of the public, and I would expect that we would continue as we go through this process to have work sessions as well as our regular meetings that would allow for public comment to reflect on what we're doing in those meetings. So, anything else on the old business items?
I would just say, Mr. Chairman, respectfully, I do think we should have public comment during those work sessions, even during the Board of Supervisors meetings. When we have work sessions on the budget, there's always a public comment period, either at the beginning or at the end of the meeting. Both would be extremely beneficial, because then we could hear up front from people and also to see what their takeaway is. While it may not be, to me, what is crystal clear with public comment sessions is that it serves the function of the pressure release valve. For folks that come out to a meeting, they feel inspired to come, they want to participate, they have something that's on their mind, they hear something in the meeting that sparks their interest. If we could build in a public comment period, I really think it would create some goodwill and possibly some very valuable insights for this commission. And I just wish you would reconsider. I completely understand and respect your opinion, but it's the practice of the Board of Supervisors, and I think it's a good practice.
Thank you for that. I certainly I certainly have no objection to getting additional comment. I think the key is that we also need time to take and absorb as a group that comment. I think your point's well taken that, let me work with Michelle. I think the idea of laying out that agenda a bit more crisply, I think would be in all of our interests, so.
Thank you.
And I have found that I've reached out to a lot of members of the public and received good information from them or good conversations with them on subjects. I only had one person who told me that it would be a waste of their time.
To do what?
To meet with me.
I think last month, when we had this meeting, we got a lot done at that meeting.
You're referring to the work session?
Yes. Yes, we got a lot done, and public comment's good, but, and I'm all in favor of that. I think it has to be structured and on point, because what happens is that public comment will tend to wander all over the place, and when we burn up time, and then we try to get back on track and try to hash out an opinion, a view, an issue with everybody here, and it gets delayed, and we were here a long time, we got a lot done, and whether you can structure a public comment at the end, or maybe at the beginning of the next session for what we covered, or somewhat, but I think it needs to be structured.
Yep.
So that we can really get something done.
I agree with Mr. Henry on that. I mean, respectfully, I feel like a work session is a work session, and we're there to take what we've received from people and our constituents, and then work on it as a team. And it takes a lot of effort and a lot of time to pull all that together. And I'm in agreement.
I appreciate that. I think the challenge, what I'm trying to strike here is a balance to making progress, but also remaining focused. And I do think limiting time input and keeping an orderly meeting and not trying to, I think the nature of this work being a very verbose document is such that really the most ideal way to get input on it, and the only way to really make clear progress is for people to be commenting on the actual language of the plan in some manner, putting it in that context. And the concern that I have is that we are able to make progress and not just kind of get bogged down in repetitive comments that are not constructive in nature. So I appreciate the sentiments. I'll pause again, give others any opportunity to speak, but I don't think should be any problem coming up with some kind of opportunity to allow the public who takes the trouble of showing up to that meeting to have some opportunity. I do think it would probably be most appropriate at the end. It is always our discretion, although it's been a challenge in the past when we've had work sessions and we've just sort of made them more open. It's really hard to make it orderly and keep the process going. So I do think we need to this needs to be managed. So I'll take that under advisement, and we'll try to be as clear as possible when we go out with that meeting. So when we do the notice, it'll have an agenda, correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Can I ask a question?
Please.
My concern as, a member of the public who's very interested in the topic is, just submitting comments that maybe the commission isn't really interested in is kind of a waste of time. And that's why letting the public or participate in your work session would be helpful, so that me or anybody else that wants to at least works on something that you're interested to hear. or doesn't, or conversely, doesn't waste their time writing up something that you're not interested to hear for, and get some feedback from the commission. Because I'm perfect, like, I'll just give you one quick example. Throughout the comprehensive plan, there's a bunch of data and sort of feedback, I guess, from various groups like the Library Fund and the WSA of whether or not they anticipate any capital improvements or capital spending in the next 5 years that the plan is supposedly for. Well, the reason all that stuff is in there because through the 1990s, one of the policies was what the state law provides is to have a capital improvements plan as part of the comprehensive plan. It's one of those optional things. So the question that I have, for example, and it's just one of many, is somehow in 1998, or in the 2004 version, I'm not sure which, that business of the policy to develop a capital improvements plan that was in there as a goal was taken out. So, but they didn't take out all those references to all those different groups and organizations that might be spending money. So my question is, I've never heard the commission discuss that. Are you going to have a capital improvements plan? And if the answer is yes, well, then those things are relevant. But if it's not going to put that in, it's not going to recommend that to the supervisors to do a 5-year sort of general fiscal plan, then all that other stuff that's clogging up or cluttering up the comp plan should be stricken, because it's like irrelevant. And you know what Chekhov said, I'm sure, which is if you show a gun in Act 1 of the play, you better have somebody get shot with it by the end. And you've got all kinds of stuff in the comp plan, in the beginning parts, that don't lead to anything at the end. And that's one of the concerns, I think, that the BZA expressed and so forth. So that's one of them. I haven't heard any feedback, do you want to be more specific in the implementation or the future land use plan? Because if those are things that you really would like to fix up, I'm perfectly happy to take a crack at writing something that I think would be more appropriate and give it to you. But on the other hand, if you think, which is what I kind of heard last time, you really don't want to do that and you just want to leave it alone the way it's been since 1980, not one word has changed. Well, then what's the point of writing that? Because it takes time. So that's my comment on why I think some interchange between members of the public and the commission while it's having the meeting would be very helpful. So I don't waste my time and I don't want to waste your time.
Thank you, Mr. Connick.
Can I just say, who do I call, when and where, and who's taking care of which card? If I'm limited to 3 minutes once a month, I'm not participating. I thought the work session would be...
So we receive written comments, and I've been suggesting that you send those to Ms. Summers. We have received several, and I think if you came to the work session and stayed for the whole thing, you would have seen that we went point by point through all of the issues raised in all of the public comments.
I never saw it
that
advertised.
Well, apologies for that. You'll have another shot on May 1st. We did go through those comments and we did address them in that manner, and we will continue to do that. So I think that's all I have to say on the matter for tonight.
I think it's very hard to take, in a work session, to take comments, ad hoc comments, and try to, when you've got a plan that how you want to proceed. But advanced comments in any form are more than welcome. And it really helps me to be able to say, okay, I can think about this in this context and where it would go or how we would do this. Whereas at the last minute, I'm sort of like, well, okay, that's interesting, but right now I got all these other things that are already on the plate. So it'd be wonderful. I'd be happy to, and especially if you could send them to Ms. Summers, then she can send them to us. And that would be great.
Derek? I don't think you can limit how you receive your information. I think some people are comfortable sitting and writing it down. Other people are more comfortable standing up and delivering it to you. The what we've talked about on this plan is the fact that there's been a sort of a lack of public, there was an attempt at some public input and it was not successful. And so that's why we are where we are, but we're seeking public comment, but we're trying to limit how it's done or whatever. And I think at a work session, which is specifically designed to deal with the comprehensive plan, people can come in and make public comments on that area. You had public comments tonight for people to comment on the plan, but you're not talking about the plan necessarily tonight and those comments, so they get lost. So I think you need to encourage both.
I believe I have been, and I will continue to do so. I would just add that it is challenging to write a document as a group. It's impossible, frankly, and there has to be a give and take. We have been appointed for this purpose. It is an express responsibility of the Planning Commission to come out with a plan. And, we have got to set the sort of rules for our engagement. And, I am trying very hard to strike a balance. I'm very interested in public input. And I would point out that what we're headed toward is producing a draft that will then be put out for public hearing. And there will be then the work of this body will be on paper and available for those who hadn't yet had an opportunity. So we are still a good bit of the way from the end, and I think the motivation for my actions and how I'm running these things is that we can continue to incorporate what we've got, dispense with those things that are really fall under the heading of opinion and overall. If you were at the last public hearing, the last work session, you obviously made reference earlier to my desire to gauge the sentiment of the commission in terms of where we were with respect to, wrapping up this version of the plan and moving on to the other. We were not unanimous on that, but there was a strong consensus, and on that basis, I'd like to keep us moving forward because, as has been pointed out, we've got a lot of other work to do. Most of the comments that we've gotten so far, quite frankly, are about the ordinances. And, I'm sensitive to that fact, and that is, we need to keep moving forward. And I also recognize that there's always going to be someone who comes to the last meeting and didn't hear anything else before this and says, well, I didn't have a chance to speak. We've been going through this. We've had 2 rounds of hearings around the county. We've been at this for years, literally, and I feel particularly responsible for keeping us moving forward and striking the right balance between getting input to fulfill our responsibility to review the plan and recognizing that planning is inherently an ongoing process. And whether we make formal commitments or not, this process will go on, and we are subject to another review requirement over the next 5 years. So that's the job. I'm trying very hard to be receptive and to listen, and I will continue to do so, and appreciate any constructive input, however delivered. But I do still intend to try to keep the meetings orderly and restrict the time for public input. I think that is a common best practice for these kinds of meetings. So.
My only other comment then, Mr. Chairman, would be that we please receive the documents that are the basis for the meetings prior to the meeting. Last time we had a work session, we received 26 questions at the beginning of the work session with no time to contemplate or research them before that meeting. And they were also not on board docs. I feel that there would have been a different public turnout that evening if they had been publicized on board docs. And so my request is that whatever we're given material-wise to work on in a work session, that it also be publicized ahead of time along with the agenda.
Well, I appreciate that sentiment. I would note that my independent work to try to summarize and assimilate the work was all based on public documents that we had all received, and I tried to put together an organized fashion to address those concerns, and I will continue to do so, but as we've been discussing, this is a working session, and there may very well be materials that are produced on the fly, and it's what we're just going to have to deal with. I think we've got a lot more material before us. I encourage all of you to look at all the materials that are coming through the various means and are being posted on board docs, so that when we have that work session, everybody has read those materials and has some thoughts formed about them.
Did the county administrator receive a copy of those 26 questions? Very good, thank you.
Before the meeting?
No, because it's FOIA, we'll have
I
to.
think it's important to understand that a great deal of pressure has been put on the Planning Commission and Mr. White to try to expedite the comprehensive plan and get something done. And it's hard to know exactly the best way to do it, but it does seem that his process is at least involving some motion and some progress, and that there will be a public meeting at the end of the work sessions where people can address the actual results of our work sessions. And given the general frustration with the progress that has been made, you can understand the chairman's concern that he really doesn't want to belabor the process any more than he actually has to. And this does not preclude public input and commentary at what seems like a very productive point of the process. Once something has been made that can be commented on and focused on.
Thank you, Mr. Bird.
So one thing here, we're trying to come together and get this comprehensive plan done. And during this course of this period of time that we've been working on, trying to get work done here, we've gone through 4 county administrators, 4 zoning administrators, and we've gone through 3 chairmen of the planning commission during this period of time. So, now we're trying to stay together on this thing and work. We talked a lot here about Fauquier County. We found out last month that they've got 40 people in their planning department, so it's pretty easy for them to take in a comment, have 10 people work on something every day until the next meeting, turn out something, and everybody look at it and taste it and all this. And whereas here, we're working on this thing ourselves, and we need time to focus and pay attention to it. And we're not disallowing anybody's input. When we get this thing put together, there'll be hearings, there'll be comments, there'll be good comments made, and we'll have to go through and tweak it and changes then. But we gotta get some momentum going to get this framework that we've built finished here. So I think we're all in the right direction.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Any other comments? Not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Smooth.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.